Wow. So welcome back. This is part 2 of our top 5 remake remasters from old school games that should see the light in new form. Clayton is coming on finally. Last week he was sick.
I was.
It's all good. No, I know. I'm just busting your chops. So I'm not going to run through my list again for everyone who tuned in. I did the Lunar series, Dino Crisis, the original Fallout, um, Final Fantasy, the original one, and I can't even remember what my last one was. Wow. Oh my god. Yeah, I wow. I don't remember what my last title was.
I have
But
a solid 4, but I'm thinking my last one I want to switch it up actually.
huh?
I
Switch
think
it
I
up.
want to switch it up, yeah. So
I'm
I'll
trying to
go.
think of what the hell my game was. Wow. Okay, well let's for actually first I just gonna go through a couple things I picked up. We talked about this, and I picked it up because I was told that it had like the speed run stuff through it, and then yeah, it wasn't. But Final Fantasy X2, another one, another HD remaster. I got Sakuna from Amazon. They actually sent me a second one because the first one, the box was damaged and I wasn't very impressed. This was an accidental price. Walmart screwed up. It was actually supposed to be $29, but they had it in their $9 bin, which is Commandos.
I never even heard of that one actually.
Space Hulk was another $9 game.
Yeah.
And I was in Giant Tiger, and you always find these obscure games, and like this probably won't ever be worth anything, but the Island of Dr. Frankenstein on the Wii was $5.
That's
I'm
it.
gonna leave it sealed. I don't know, this epic adventure exploration game. You're a mechanic who keeps flying islands in the air. Interesting.
It's a strange subject matter, like strange art style for the subject matter. Like the art style seems to like juxtapose the subject matter.
So this
Strange.
is all for you. Well, not for you, but this is all on you because myself and Svenny McGee, we did ours last night. I do have a couple recommendations from Drew and the guys over at Inside the Game, which once I find an in to cut you off, then I'll get that going. But I think it's funny. One of the titles that you and Adam picked are probably one of. I'm not going to say anything. Go ahead. Start.
Okay. So for put me on the spot for my first one. I'll start at the back end and work up. I have one that I want to change, but I'm not sure what to change it with. I'm just looking at my wall, and I have a theme for all of my changes, right? Like back in the like way back throughout all of the console ages, especially going back to the 8 and 16-bit days, we'd have games that seemed like the story and the ideas and the worlds that they created were far too ambitious for the technology at the time. Like it didn't matter how good a story was, they were severely hampered, especially in the 8-bit days, by cartridge memory and what they could actually do. So I'll start with probably The Immortal. So if you never played The Immortal, this game was utterly amazing. It was dark fantasy. It was an isometric 3D game, and it got slammed from critics for being too linear because it's a dungeon crawler, but there is basically one way through the game. There are only so many enemies. You fight the enemies in a isometric 3D cutaway, much the same way you do in Final Fantasy, but the character sprites are 3/4 the size of the screen. They're very, very tall. They're very large in this version. And it relies on a stamina meter to perform attacks and dodges.
That actually sounds a lot like Lunar on the DS. Stamina.
And there and this is electronic arts when it was still good. It was one guy who developed it named Will Harvey, and I meant to do some more looking up on the actual game, but they did a port on the one of the Amiga systems. They did it on the NES as well, but they had to change the actual combat mechanics because of the limitations of the cartridge. Like, you don't even get this combat style on the NES. It's even simpler than this. But the game has an incredibly good story. It is told as you descend through the dungeon. You are trying to rescue your teacher, who is a wizard, from a dragon. But and I'm really watering this down. But as you get deeper and deeper, you discover that there's trickery afoot, that there's much more going on than you initially thought. And it was just a really, really good story. And I would really like to see I'd really like to see a remake of this, because I think they could do a lot with it. Because one of the major selling points of this game was the myriad ways that you could die. Like, there's 1,000 ways to die in this game, and every death comes with its own set of animations. And when you kill enemies, every one of their deaths is unique. Like, you can smack them in the head with your scepter and their head will explode. Lightning will strike them. They'll burn to death. Like, you cut them in half. And it's really graphic. Like, it's as graphic as they could make it using the technology that they had. So as much as it got slammed for being very, very linear, I still, like, I looked for this game. I looked for the NES port. You know what I mean? I played this game and I played it over and over again until you can't really speed run it. All you can do is do the dungeon flawlessly, but I could do the entire game without issue. So I'd like to see a remake of this game, because it's something that not a lot of people now will even remember. You know what I mean? Unless you lived through the 8 and 16-bit game days, people won't remember this. And that's why it needs to be brought back, because everybody says, oh, I want to see a new Mario. I want to see let's remake this, let's remake that. You know what I mean? But it's always the major names. Like, let's see some more obscure stuff.
Yeah, so for sure. Okay, so I'll just jump in. That first of all, the fifth game was Conkers for me.
Oh yeah.
But unfortunately, it'll be an Xbox title just because Microsoft owns Rare. Yeah. But we didn't. Neither of us. Well, besides the fact that Adam said Chrono Trigger, that was really the only old school, like in that sense. Where, well, I did Final Fantasy, but because like he said, like, you're going to get somebody that's going to be like, well, of course you're going to say Chrono Trigger. But if you don't say it, then you're going to have someone saying, well, why didn't you say Chrono Trigger? So yeah, he went with that. But my buddy Drew over at Inside the Game said that, where did it go? That he would take a remake of any Splinter Cell at this point, because they're really big into like Rainbow Six Siege and stuff. And then somebody else had said that the orphanage level in the Splinter Cell multiplayer is the creepiest thing they've ever played. So I guess I mean, I never played Splinter Cell myself. I played the first one. I just wasn't really into it, but it sounds interesting. And I guess this orphanage in HD graphics would be pretty like Resident Evil-y.
I don't remember the multiplayer aspect of Splinter Cell, other than it was spies versus mercs, and that a lot of people were really on about it. I didn't have Xbox Live Gold, like Xbox Live at that time, so I can't really comment on it. I think I might have seen it once or twice, but I can tell you that I was a massive, massive fan of the first and third Splinter Cells. I felt like Pandora Tomorrow, the second one, recycled too much from the first one and actually didn't really go far enough. It felt like they didn't advance the graphics. The story was just kind of we made a ton of money with the first one, so let's just kind of keep the story going for the second one. And it's actually, out of the trilogy, it's the weak point for me, because the first one it's the first one, and it was amazing in an age when Metal Gear Solid was the de facto stealth game.
Yep.
Splinter Cell took it out of the arcades and almost turned it into a simulation. You know what I mean? That game was hard, especially when you got to the last level. Like, it was friggin' hard. And then the third one, The third one, they seriously bumped up the graphics. The storytelling was really good. The sound design was actually really, really good too. The environmental effects, like the first level where you come in and you're in a midnight rainstorm, was awesome for the time. Like I got no complaints about that game. And the end was, it wasn't super great. It was kind of like a standoff thing, but it was quite a good end to that trilogy. And then they went to 4, Double Agent. It started off good, and then it got all weird with the double agent stuff, and then Lambert died, and I don't know. And then 5, Conviction. I just hated Conviction. The mark and execute system that they implemented into that, I just couldn't get into it. They took away your ability to like move bodies and stuff like that. Basically, they just turned it into a full-on arcade shooter with mark and execute mechanics, and that was it. You know what I mean? Like, it was a weak end. So that's my thoughts on that.
It's all good.
Okay, my next game.
Yeah.
Okay, you'll have to forgive the fact that I only have this on I don't actually have a complete version of it. Any mid-90s PC guy is going to remember this. Myst. So the reason that I say Myst is because I feel like if you know what Myst is a point-and-click adventure where you move a cursor around static images, and if you can imagine it, because I imagine most people who game these days will not understand what a point-and-click adventure is. Imagine you are playing Google Maps Street View, but with objectives. So you click on the picture and you move down the street. You click on the picture, move down the street, but there's stuff in the picture that you can interact with, you know, a fireplace, a book, a this, a that. So that's exactly what Myst is, but it takes place on an island, and you're trying to solve the mystery, I believe, of 2 missing brothers. Or no, you're Atreus, the father. You're trying to solve the mystery of this guy. And there's this whole really in-depth mystery that unfolds with it. And the thing is that because of the limitations of technology, they use 3D pre-rendered images for the island. Now, in an age where Shenmue, like a game like Shenmue on the original Dreamcast, has implemented the fully reactive eyes entertainment system, where you can walk around and they place actual interactive cursors on objects of importance around the map. I feel like the point and click, like the point and click genre, is basically dead after that. There's no reason to have it like that. We have the technology where we could make the island of Myst a fully interactive open world sandbox with these elements, with these symbols, these books, these fireplaces, all of this stuff to interact with. I don't need static images. I can just run around the island. And I feel like they could add a lot more detail to it. And it was amazing actually how alive the island of Myst felt, even though the images were static. They were static images, but there was movement inside of them. You know, you'd see like, I don't know, birds and smoke and stuff like that moving, you know, like emanating and stuff. But you couldn't freely move through the world. So I feel like a graphical remake of Myst with a fully interactive, fully traversable map would go a long way towards dragging a whole new generation of players back into that world, because that game was really good. The story was excellent. The characters that they developed, even though you never actually meet them, were excellent. The puzzles were awesome. Like, they were hard. Don't get me wrong. I had a couple of stumpers there. They were good ones. And at first, the island feels completely alien until you learn how things work, until you learn the symbolism of the island, until you learn how the father and the sons think. Excellent game, excellent ending. I can't say enough about how much I would like to see a remake of that game. And I mean, they made at least 2 more. I remember Riven, and then I remember Myst 3, I think it was. But I know that they made more than just the one, because Myst in the 90s was ridiculously popular. It was a huge smash on PC, and even when it got ported to consoles, I think it made quite an impact.
Nice.
Even though consoles were not really the place to go to play point and click adventures, right? Yeah, I feel like that one would get a lot of mileage out of a remake. Okay, what's next? Okay, the next one. This one here. This one is probably the other one that you said had been chosen by Adam.
Nope.
Really?
Yep.
No Final Fantasy 3? Okay, so Final Fantasy 3, just to and my reasoning for choosing it is because this is, as far as I'm concerned, the absolute pinnacle of 16-bit Square Final Fantasies. This is the best one. It's super dense. It's got dark, serious tones. It's got awesome characters. It's got an awesome antagonist. Like, Kefka is the best of the bad guys when it comes to Final Fantasy villains. Like, especially when you're talking about the later guys, like Final Fantasy X, like Sin and Orphan in 13, and Kefka is just the guy. He's like the Darth Vader of Final Fantasy. He's
he's the Heath Ledger Joker.
Yeah, he's got so much character to him. Like, just, and you see him. The thing is that he's not the big bad just waiting at the end of the path. I mean, you see him like all the way through the game, even though like Emperor Gestahl is the ruler of the empire. Kefka is the one who's really pulling the strings, and he's just a maniac. And to convey something like mania or insanity on a 16-bit game machine is crazy. But mostly what I want them to do is I would like to see them redo Final Fantasy VI in the Octopath Traveler engine. I think that would be awesome. And I think that would pay an incredible amount of respect to the work that was done to the sprites for 6, because 6 exhibits a mastery of artwork. Like, Square had been working with the Super Nintendo for a couple of years. They had a long pedigree of Final Fantasy games by this point. They were well established. You know, they had been making some of the best games for both the SNES and the NES for years. And this was, they just poured everything they had into this. And I mean, like, you have to remember that right after this, they started on 7. Right. And I know that 7 went through like a bunch of changes and this and that, but they were basically starting over, right? Mm-hmm. They were starting over with the 3D technology and the hardware. This is them after having mastered. They were like, this is not the swan song, but this is our masterwork. This is our magnum opus. And I feel like I've seen a couple of games try to pull off what Octopath Traveler did. I don't know if you played 3D Dot Heroes by From Software for the PS3.
No, well, I didn't play it, but I've obviously heard about it.
Yeah, it's like, it's more like Minecraft as pixel art in an isometric 3D world. It was really good though. That with the effects, like with the post processing effects, like smoke and field of focus, you know what I mean, like things in the background are blurred out and stuff, with the lighting and whatnot. Like, games like Octopath Traveler look incredibly stylized, and it's a strange art style, but it looks so good. And I would totally rip Final Fantasy 3 again. Especially if you consider that when you go to fight the bosses, like especially when you get later through the game, the bosses are these extravagant paintings. You can tell that they're pixelated, but the quality of the artwork is just undeniable. Like, when you fight a behemoth in 6, or when you fight Kefka in the Light of Judgment in 6, like, the artwork is there, you know, and it looks amazing. It's just pixelated. So I would have the rest of the game be an Octopath, but then the bosses be hand drawn by what's the artist's name? I'm drawing a blank now. Yoshitaka Amano. Is that
you know more than me about that stuff?
I can't remember his name for the life of me, because I'm putting myself on the spot. But his artwork permeates this game, and it would be awesome to see all of that stuff realized with. And I want all the bells and whistles too. Like, make no mistake, I want the original version of the game included in it. I'd like to see an updated as well as an original score. like like all real instruments, not chip tunes and MIDI tunes and whatnot. And add the lighting and add all the stuff you guys had to edit out, add in things like debug mode, you know what I mean? Give us the whole package. I feel like we don't get enough of that stuff these days. Developers are afraid that we're going to rush through their stuff too much. Meanwhile, on the iOS, you get games like Final Fantasy 9, like on iOS and Android, you get Final Fantasy 9 with fast forward, encounter skip, level 99, everything max.
God mode, all that stuff.
Exactly. You know what I mean? So you can play with the game. Like, yeah, anybody who's paying like $30 for Final Fantasy 9 on iOS or Android has more than likely already played it on PlayStation or PlayStation 2 or whatever, right?
Yeah.
We just want to go back through the game and just mess with it. We don't need to slog through the thing again.
Yeah.
But anyways, yeah, so Final Fantasy 6 is my next pick. After that, and I know there's going to be a lot of people are going to say, well, yeah, but they have to build it from the ground up. Panzer Dragoon Saga for the Sega Saturn. And the reason I want this one is because I feel like this game came out at roughly the same time as Final Fantasy VII. It was on 4 discs. It had a huge amount of cutscenes, really good high quality CG for the time. The gameplay was awesome. The story was awesome, but it was already 4 discs. Like, I feel like if they wanted to make the story longer, they couldn't unless they just added more discs. And you're talking about a game that's going to go into 5, 6 discs. You know what I mean? It was an RPG. It was actually fairly short for an RPG, especially at that time when RPGs were basically coming into being one of the most popular genres. Like with the release of Final Fantasy VII, and the backlog of stuff that Square already had that people started looking into after that game was released. This game could do so much more. Like, if we had a graphical and sound upgrade as well as a memory upgrade, I think we could have had a much longer story. And I wouldn't be surprised if they had to cut large chunks of the story out just to accommodate the system itself, because this game came out like right at the end of the Saturn's lifetime, short as it was, and it was basically the swan song for the system, right? They only made initially, and this is not I'm not backing this up with data or anything, but I'm pretty sure that the initial run for America was only 10,000 copies.
It's funny, like this is like Groundhog Day, deja vu. Like, literally everything that you're saying is exactly what Adam was talking about, because that was his number 3 was Panzer, and like 10,000 copies, like 4 discs. That's why I'm smiling, because like it's just a different voice saying almost, and not in a bad way, but like reiterating exactly what he had mentioned yesterday.
The thing is, though, is that this is one of those games that, like, the hype is real. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
And everybody has the same thing to say about it. It's one of those games. It commands a high price point for Sega Saturn. I mean, when you consider like what is it? Stadium events is like what, $10,000-$15,000 now. $1,200 is not a lot to pay with this, and that's COVID prices, right? Like, this game spiked when COVID dropped. So it's been kind of artificially, Saturn especially, actually, the entire Saturn library has been artificially inflated due to COVID. I know that my collection has increased in value quite a bit. But the thing is that this is a really hard sell, because apparently the initial code that was made for the game was lost. So it's not as easy as just slapping a new coat of paint on it and then sending it out the door. They would literally have to make this game again from the ground up. You know?
Yeah, and again, that's exactly what Adam said. Like, you have to build the entire game.
Yeah. Now, I can't remember what the studio is, but there's a studio who has remastered the original Panzer Dragoon, and
on Switch.
They have it on PlayStation 2 as well, or PlayStation 4 as well. But actually, I think they have it on Xbox. I'm not sure if they have it on Xbox. Don't quote me on that, but I know that they have it on PlayStation 4. They're making it, and they are also apparently making Panzer Dragoon Zwei, the sequel. And I think if they make enough money on that, they will probably end up going back and trying to do Saga. Now, that's just me being optimistic. I hope. Like, realistically, it's probably not going to happen, but I mean, it would be nice because this game is excellent and it is totally worth the time, and it would totally be worth the effort. And it would take some of the mystery I feel out of the game, because the price point of this game is so high that a lot of people who are like not able to invest the amount of money that this game commands can actually play it. They can see, well, what is the big deal about this game? Because I mean, you can watch it, you can watch the footage on YouTube and whatnot, but it's not the same as actually playing the game. But the battle system, like the story is excellent. The battle system is completely unique. The characters, the world itself is amazing. I mean, if you consider the fact that the first Panzer Dragoon was released as a rail shooter launch title for the Saturn, the sequel added more stuff. And I distinctly remember reading the review in Game Players magazine way back when it was released, and the reviewer, I can't remember who it was, said right in the interview, why can't we have an RPG of this game? This world is so rich, it's so full. Mm-hmm. There is no reason why we could not make an RPG out of this game. It deserves to be way more than just a rail shooter. And they were right. And that world is completely filled out in this game. Nice. Like there's a lot going on to it. It's very, and even once you play the game, even once you've finished everything and unlocked all of the secrets, there is still, they never give everything away. Like there's still so much mystery. There is still so much stuff that could be plumbed out of this game. And Orta, like when they released Orta on the Xbox 360, I feel like it was a step back. I don't feel like it was as good. I feel like
are you talking about Orta?
Yeah, I feel like they wanted to release a game that had the name, but that it didn't feel as good. That's all I'm gonna say.
I remember originally buying that at one of the shows down south, thinking like, oh, like it's a Panzer Dragoon. I never ended up playing it. Like it just sat on my shelf, and I don't have it anymore. I don't even know what happened with it. I think I might have sold it to somebody, but
no, it's excellent. It's still an excellent game. But I mean, when you consider that this was the Panzer Dragoon that was released before it, there is no way that it would not pale in comparison, because this one is so good.
Yeah.
Orta was still really, really good. Don't get me wrong. It was awesome, but it just wasn't quite this. So I'd like to see a remake of this, but this is like my ambitious, most wish list kind. This is when other people were freaking out about Final Fantasy VII being remade. This is the one I want remade. I want to play this again. I want to play it with new graphics, new sound. I want them to expand the story. And yeah, this is my number one wish.
My just to quickly interject, because I'm not sure if you hear all those blips, but I've got Discord open right now too. One of the other guys that is part of the show, he's actually a really good friend of mine, Nate. He said, yeah, Splinter Cell would be a great idea as a remake, but we'd probably get it in VR. And then he did the like angry Steam nose face. So but it's true, like a lot of the games that they do come out with remakes, like, or not even remakes, but even Hitman, like they have VR enabled modes now, and it's like because VR is seems to be the next step. But yeah, so he had said like it'd be VR. I said, well, it'd probably be Splinter Cell with VR enabled.
Yeah.
So, and then another, just to quickly jump in before you do your last one, another guy on the Discord page, Agent Howell, said that he would love to see a remake of Land of the Dead: Road to Fiddler's Green.
Oh yeah.
And apparently it's actually getting a remake, so he's excited about that.
Well, we went through a couple of years ago, actually, now last generation, pretty much from the PS3 switching into the PS4. We actually went through like a lot of remakes. I shouldn't even call them remakes. I should call them reskins. Like they re-released all of the God of War games, but all they did was clean up the textures and clean up the sound a little bit. and re-release it. They didn't actually do anything to it. And then they did the same thing with Shadow of the Colossus and Ico for the originally for the PlayStation 2. They re-released it on the PlayStation 3, cleaned up, right? And it was like, oh yeah, they're like, yeah, it's a Shadow of the Colossus remake, yeah, but it's not really a remake. All they did was just clean up the graphics just a little bit. And then what was it, last year or the year before? Blue Point turned around and like really did an awesome graphical overhaul on Shadow of the Colossus, and that that is one of my favorite games. Like GOAT, it's the GOAT. It's awesome. It's amazing because it's, if you consider how much I fawn over Panzer Dragoon, it's for many of the same reasons. It's because um, uh, they created a totally unique world. They never tell you all of the secrets. You don't know why this place exists. You know what I mean? You never figure everything out. And it's amazing for that. It's the same as The Last Guardian.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Like, they create this world and you can just get lost in it. And the time that you spend with the game, you're in its clutches and you just can't get away.
I gotta, my dog is barking. I'm just gonna pause for like 2 minutes,
Okay.
and I'll be right back. I'm gonna refill my coffee too. So
Okay, I'm gonna go to the bathroom.
oh, okay, thanks.
Here.
All right, that was a little bit of a glitch in the matrix. Never fails. I'm not gonna edit it out. I just think it's funny. Like, get into it, have a good conversation, and all of a sudden the dogs have to go outside. It's like, oh. They're good. They're laying down now. So we'll continue with your talk about your game there.
Okay, where was I?
You were still talking about Panzer, and then I jumped in and said about the VR and how it's the next step.
We were talking about remakes versus reskins, because there have been so many of them, right? Like even games like the Uncharted collection. I never actually bought the collection, I don't think, but I do like. There is sometimes it's kind of nice to have that stuff done because I have, like, if you ever played the first Uncharted, everybody looks like they're coated in baby oil. It's really strange. Like the graphics in 2 were so good. Like they were really good in Uncharted 2. And then 3, like obviously 3 and 4, like
they get better.
Oh man, they got even better. But in the first one, the game is really good. The mechanics are all there. The gameplay's there. The story's there. The combat needed a little bit of balancing, but the graphics, everybody looks like they're coated in baby oil. And I mean, I challenge you, go back and look at the PS3 version. It is, it's funny to watch them. Everybody looks like they're all greased up.
Even on the screenshots on the back, they look like that.
Yeah. It's like baby oil island there. But so it's nice when developers can kind of go back and they can put finishing touches on stuff and add a little bit of power and clean some stuff up. Maybe add some quality of life changes that were not there before. Like I've mentioned in other videos before, Ninja Gaiden on the original Xbox to Ninja Gaiden Black to Ninja Gaiden Sigma. Like they just kept adding stuff, right?
Yeah.
It's nice. And they didn't even really clean up the graphics. Like they didn't do too much. I think that the PSP actually, or the PS Vita graphics, believe they were better. I think they were cleaned up a little bit, but that's just optimizing and what they learned over the years. But they didn't really do too much to it. But yeah, reskin versus an actual remake. And for a while, it was starting to feel like pretty cheap, where we were getting a lot of games where they just slapped them in a new package, put them on a $50 or $60 price point, and then shipped them back out the door. It was nice earlier on to see games like for me, the perfect remake or the perfect version of a remake was the Halo. I believe it was the 10th anniversary edition. Halo CE, the first one. They took the original Xbox game. They improved the graphics drastically. Like they brought it on par with Halo 4. They added a whole bunch of stuff. They actually even added some Kinect features to it. Like you could scan enemies, you could scan weapons and items and stuff like that, and you could add them to like this gallery of items that you had. And There was a couple other bells and whistles that they added, but they went back and I don't want to call it a reskin, because they did basically what Shadow of the Colossus did, where they actually like improved the textures, they improved the weather effects, they improved the environmental effects. Like, it was actually quite good. I know you're a PlayStation gamer, but for a long time I was a Halo guy. I'm not so much anymore, because I don't know, 5 is kind of getting into weird headspace, but that's neither here nor there. As a remake, that was actually a good example of what you could do with quality. And the thing is that the day one price point of that game was like $40.
Yeah.
So you got the game, and it was like a 10-year-old game, but you got it with all of these extras and these amazing graphics. And they actually gave you the ability with one button to switch between the original Xbox graphics and the updated graphics. So you could sit there and ding, 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 and just toggle back and forth. And so you can have basically a side-by-side comparison of how much had been improved and what they had changed. And I thought actually that was pretty awesome. That was a bit of a flex on their part, I think, but it was pretty cool that they could do that.
Nice.
So getting to my last game. Is this my last game? Or did I?
It's the last one.
Okay, this one, Guardian Heroes, another Saturn game. And if you ever played this one, I don't know anybody who has anything bad to say about this game. This game for Saturn, even though Saturn didn't have all the controller ports, is actually 1 to 6 players. It is a side-scrolling beat 'em up. And what you would do is, instead of just walking into the background, or if anybody remembers actually, the old games like Streets of Rage, Double Dragon, all of those, you would be able to kind of walk into the background and walk into the foreground back and forth in a sort of I don't know how to call it. It's like an isometric view, but not really. It's more like you just kind of move up or down the screen, Golden Axe style, you know. But the issue I always had with those games was the fact that if you're standing even a couple of pixels below the enemy, the hitbox doesn't register and you end up punching the air. And that always drove me nuts. So what Guardian Heroes does is it actually only includes 3 planes that you fight on. So there's the foreground, the midground, and the background. And you use the shoulder buttons to just jump between them. So enemies would either appear in the foreground, in the midground, or the background. So if they were in the midground, you would instantly learn to recognize that, and you jump to the midground and fight them. There were tons of characters. I don't know if it says it on the back of the box. Oh yeah, 50 different paths to reach multiple endings. So because there was a ton of characters to play as. There was a bunch of characters, I'm pretty sure. No, there was only like 6. But if you did multiplayer, you could play as all of the enemies as well. And you could scale the levels. The multiplayer was actually really cool. The abilities that these guys had were like these room-clearing attacks. And like I said, you could play as 1 to 6 players. And so it was all pixel art, right? Like it was all 2D sprites jumping back and forth in the level, and they used scaling to make them bigger or smaller. They used a heavy scaling effects on spells and stuff like that. And it was just a ton of fun. The story was some nonsense. I don't know. I'm pretty sure it was based on some external like expanded universe story, some comic or something like that, or a cartoon. But the characters were all really vibrantly animated. You know what I mean? Like the colors were really bright. The attacks were super flashy. It was just a ton of fun. And I would like to see a remake of this because I want them to keep all of the same game structure. I just want them to clean up the art and the sound. This game, for no other reason than it got a remake actually on the Game Boy Advance, I believe. I don't think it ever got a sequel, but it was a ton of fun. It was a ton of fun for more than one player, and I think that couch co-op is something that we need to see more of. You know, like I love having couch co-op. I mean, obviously that's kind of out the window when it comes to the pandemic.
Couch co-op and chill.
Yeah, but we should have like they could add. There's no reason that they couldn't add like online multiplayer as well as couch co-op, you know, and clean up those graphics. And again, like Final Fantasy VI, they have the power now to do these incredibly detailed, hand painted works of art that would just scale on the screen. And it's one of those ones that it's a shame if you never got to play it when it originally came out, because I could rent this on a Friday back in the day. I would rent this, and then me and my friends, we'd play it all weekend and then,
Mhm.
bring it back. But there was always lots of fun to be had. And the reason that the reason that I'm suggesting that they remake it is because it hasn't carried forward. I think there may be a version on Xbox Live now. I would have to actually go and look. I'm not sure. But I never hear anybody talking about this game. I never see anybody talking about it. And this is like, I would liken this to uh, Smash Bros. Like the multiplayer,
Nice.
not the same, but I mean, you can scale your levels as well as your levels and all of your friends' levels. Um, and these attacks, just juggling attacks, like lightning attacks, ground clearing attacks, fireball attacks. Like it was just wild, like if you weren't actually the one playing the game, you would basically not be able to keep up with what was going on the screen. The action was so fast and so furious, you know. um
One game that it doesn't really need a remaster, but I think that it had a lot of potential, and I'm kind of disappointed that Sony just dropped all support for it. But was PlayStation Battle All Stars.
oh yeah,
Like
they're
that, like it was their response to Smash Bros. But I mean, obviously, people are like, "Well, it's a Smash Bros. Ripoff." Well, it's Sony's attempt at it. I mean, it wasn't a great game, but like I think that they could have just done so much more with it.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, I would
So
totally agree. Yeah, because they had who do they have for characters? They had Kratos, they had Sackboy, they had
a Big Daddy,
Big.
even he was a DLC though because Bioshock was on both systems.
Yeah,
But you had Jack, you had I think Ratchet,
yeah.
um, Cooking Mama. I can't. I don't even remember. You know what? I'm just gonna bring up. I want to bring up the roster now. I know they had plans for DLC, um, but it just never materialized, which is too bad. I mean, you can get it digitally, but I mean, I don't buy digital. Apart from one game, but
It's not it's not a real surprise though, because it seems to be uh like when you talk about like competitive multiplayer games that end up being used in competitions and stuff, it seems to be more of a um like a player driven. Like it's the players who choose what games become the
yeah,
big games. And Smash Bros already had an established pedigree when Sony came in and tried the Rumble All Stars or whatever it was. There was no way that they were going to gain any ground because Smash Bros was already too refined. It was too well balanced. Too many people knew the moves. I
yeah.
mean, I was watching a video the other day actually where did you ever play Catherine by I think
No,
Atlas?
but I mean that's another game that's gotten an HD remaster for every system.
It has, but there's also a really obscure competitive mode in that game that had a huge surge in popularity due to people after the fact realizing that the multiplayer aspect of it actually had a lot of there was a lot of tactics involved in play in winning at it. So small pockets of player groups in different cities started playing this game, and then eventually they realized, they're like, oh man, like there's a lot of people playing the multiplayer aspect of this game. And then they started trying to um, they got a booth for it at the big game competitions, right? So people started playing this game for money, and then I guess the publisher, I guess, re-released it, or they rebalanced it or something, and they kind of, I wouldn't say that they ruined it, but they changed it from the original. They added a bunch of stuff to it, whereas the original was super basic, and it was the actual hardwired mechanics to the game mode were extremely simple. There was only a couple of rules, but people developed tactics to play that game, and they created a meta. Like it was fascinating to watch. I watched the entire video on it and I couldn't believe it because it seemed like something so simple, but these guys are talking about all of these like really advanced tactics when it comes to playing it. And I was like, wow, like that's amazing. So it doesn't surprise me that All Stars couldn't break into that because I mean, there's going to be really only room for one at the top of the mascot
Yeah,
brawl.
I mean they're like I have their cast of characters. Like you have Big Daddy, you have Cole from Infamous, some guy named Colonel Radek from Killzone, Dante, the evil Cole McGrath, Fat Princess, Hihachi from Tekken, Isaac from Dead Space, Jack and Daxter.
Isaac, really? They chose Isaac? Okay.
Yeah.
Colonel Radek from Killzone, though, that guy wins.
That
was such a douche.
Cat and Dusty from Gravity Rush, Kratos, Nariko, Nathan Drake, Parappa the Rapper, Raiden, Ratchet and Clank, Sackboy, Daniel Fortescue, Sly Cooper, Spike, Sweet Tooth, Toro, and Zeus as a downloadable character.
Wow.
So I mean it like they had a good roster, but just I guess gave up.
There's only room for one at the top of the mascot brawler pile. Like they just came in too late. And it's not their fault. I mean, it seems to me like they gave up pretty quick, right? Like Smash Bros wasn't great when it was first released. I mean, if you try to go back and play the N64 version, the controls are hard.
Yeah,
they're hard. They feel unresponsive and sluggish, but they spent time and releases balancing it, making it better, adding characters. Sony All Stars feels like they tried to cash in on that fame, and then when they didn't immediately knock it out of the park, they're like, well, whatever, we don't care, and then they just moved on. You know what I mean? Like if they really believed in it, and if they really wanted a piece of that action, they released that game merely as a test bed for reception to see if people would jump onto it. And when they didn't wholeheartedly latch onto it, they're like, okay, whatever, next thing, moving on. So, yeah.
Oh. Look at the time.
It's easy when you start talking about old games. And
oh yeah, no, absolutely. Like
I thought about this list. I thought about what I wanted to see out of these games, and
mine changed 3 times. Like like I said, I changed stuff literally before I went on to talk with Adam.
Yeah.
So it's just like, and again, a lot of the games that were on my original list were more wants than realistic. Like as great as it would have been to see a Mario RPG remake, is it going to happen? Who knows? Because Nintendo and Square are finally talking again. So and like you see everything on, but like the graphics that they came out with on the Super Nintendo for Mario RPG were like insane. Like they were so good. It doesn't really need a remake.
That was originally my number 5. Like Mario RPG was my number 5 pick for that list because it is awesome. But then I think about it, and just recently I was playing Paper Mario for the Wii. Like, so even though we never got a remake of the Super Nintendo one, we've had multiple entries in the Paper Mario franchise. And we're getting a lot of like spiritual successors. If you want to talk about getting an actual dyed-in-the-wool remake of that specific game, yeah, it would be awesome if we could get that.
Yeah.
But I feel like if they tried to re-release it and zhuzh up the graphics, you know what I mean? Like that the battle system would end up just being a little bit too, it would almost end up being too basic. If you ever played Blue Dragon for the Xbox 360, everything before you get the dragon transformations, that's what the game would be like. I feel like it would just end up being a little bit too dry. I mean, obviously, if you had the ambition and you had the drive to remake the Super Mario RPG, you would want to improve on a bunch of those things.
Yeah.
But I'm not a man of that vision, you know. I just see little bonks and little stars and all that kind of.
Oh yeah, you know? It's one of those games that's it's a timeless classic. Like you don't need to remake it.
I would play it just the way that it is. I'm actually not a huge fan of the 3/4 isometric view either. Like, I always have a hard time with the controls because it always feels like I should just be pushing left, and the maps always demand that on isometric maps that you go diagonal down left or diagonal up left, diagonal up right. You know what I mean? Like, I played Sonic 3D Blast for the Genesis and the Saturn, and it was a game about speed, and it was just so effing hard to wrap my head around that whole diagonal thing. Because I mean, especially when you consider back in the day, like the Genesis and Super Nintendo controllers were not made to go diagonally. I mean, they gave it to you as an option, but let's face it, like it always sucked just a little bit to have to use diagonal. You never knew if for me personally, I never, maybe I'm just a klutz, but I never knew if when I pushed diagonal up right, if my character was going to go up or right or upright. I don't know. That's my personal beef.
Oh yeah, for sure. So, are you coming on next weekend? It'll be Saturday.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm coming on next
Yeah,
week.
I finally got Mike to agree to come on, but it's still I got Mike and Robin. We're gonna talk about like how COVID and like the pandemic and everything have affected shows, and
Oh man.
how how we can make like make it fun for people. Like I said, like I've actually had people being self-centered asking why we haven't announced the show. Like, come on, there's a reason we haven't announced the show.
See it, and I'll save it for next weekend, really. But for me personally, the realistic end of the show, once all of the other obstacles are cleared, I think that people are going to be very surprised at how much the prices have spiked when they go to the table and they look at that game that they wanted sitting on the table and they're like, what?
Yeah.
You know, like I feel like there's going to be the number one takeaway for people from the next show that gets put on, like that you guys put on, is going to be the prices are so high. Why are the prices so high? And I feel like that everybody's going to kind of need to temper their expectations when it comes to what price points they see on games when they walk into those conventions. And it's not just yours. I mean, it's all of them, right?
Everywhere.
Like, prices have spiked, and it doesn't matter what online lists you look on. Prices have risen drastically in the last 8 months, and it's a direct result of COVID. So I'm like, like I want to buy stuff, but at the same time, I'm like, I may have to wait until now. If I was going to sell from my collection, now would actually be the perfect time. But to buy now, I've totally cooled off on my buying because I just can't justify or can't afford to pay the inflated prices for these games at the moment. Yeah. I gotta wait until it comes down a little bit.
Well, you'll never find CJ Elephant for a decent price ever again.
No, that elephant has flown the coop.
No, that's perfect. So we'll end on that note, and we'll well, myself, Mike, and Robin, like if you have any questions that you want to ask, I mean, I'm still, even though I'm in a different city, like, well, we're all in different cities, but still heavily involved with what's been going on. And we haven't really, like Mike and I haven't really sat down to hash anything out and talk about what we can and can't do. But that'll be hopefully soon. Well, I mean, everything keeps changing now with every day is something different. So, but yeah, we'll save that one for next week when we get Robin and Mike on.
Sounds good.
Alrighty, well, that was part 2. I'm probably gonna put part 1 on today and then part 2 at some point during the week so that I can make space for the weekend recording. But thanks again for coming on, and I'm sure we'll still talk throughout the week. So have a good night. Wow, a good night. Jeez.
Have a good day.
Have a good day, sir. All right, take care.